I'm Jenna Miscavige. I was born and raised in Scientology. I left when I was 21 years old and wrote a book about it. My uncle, David Miscavige, is the leader of Scientology, and this is my YouTube channel. Hi guys, I know it's been a few days since I've done a video, and I've been wanting to. I've just been really busy. I've been flying back and forth, and I've felt a teeny tiny bit sick, but I'm feeling better today, and so I thought I would jump on and say hi. There was a subject that I thought might be interesting for you guys, and that is about my book deal and how that came to be. And initially I wanted to talk about this from the point of view of, you know, people writing their own books, because, you know, whether you're an ex-Scientologist or you're just somebody who has experienced many things in your life, which of course is everybody, and that's actually one of the points I want to make, is that I truly believe that everybody has an interesting story, and I think that there are so many benefits to telling it. And whether this is something you do because you want to get a book deal and make tons of money on, or if it's just something that you want to do so that you can pass it along to your family members, or it's just something you want to do for yourself so you can clarify your own thoughts about your past, and just sort of do it as a form of therapy. And so that's what I was going to initially sort of talk about this subject from the point of view of, but I think that maybe it's interesting about how I got my book deal and how that came to be. So whatever, we can talk about it all. I'm just driving to a coffee shop now, where I usually do some of my work, and so it'd be fun to chat on the way. So when I came out of Scientology and started first speaking out about it, I had the website with two other gals, ex-Scientologykids.com, and there was, like, I would get contacted by media all the time, whether it was like Inside Edition or like you know, I was on ABC Nightline. I'm trying to think of what year that was. I mean, I think it was probably like 2007 or 2006. And when I was on that show, I was contacted by a lady named Lisa Pulitzer, who wound up eventually being the ghostwriter of my book, because she had seen me on Nightline, and she had previously done a book with Elisa Wall from the FDLS or FLDS, and she had ghostwritten the book with her, and she reached out and she said, I think you have a really interesting story, can I come see you? And so Lisa flew out to San Diego, and she had dinner with me and my ex-husband, and she was a very wonderful person, so sweet, smart, but she was just like a very, very kind person. And I just thought that it was really nice that she was interested in my story. Oops. Okay. I thought that it was very nice that she was interested in my story. And we stayed in touch for years. We started working on a book proposal, and in those years I was like writing a bunch of stuff about my story, and we just kept in touch. I think at the time she had initially spoken to her publisher, who she had worked with many times before, HarperCollins, and she said, oh, I know this girl and we want to write a book together. And they had said, the time isn't right now, but keep checking. And just for many years, I just kept writing in that time, and me and Lisa just kept in touch. And then I had been on a few other shows in between that time. I honestly can't even remember what exactly they were. I think that it was ABC 2020, or there's another name. It was one with Dan Harris, who, by the way, who I met for that show, who's a very, very nice person. He writes a book called 10% Happier, which I really enjoyed. And so I was, I believe I was on that show, or I was on another show, and then I went to New York to go be on the show with Dan Harris, and I was contacted from Lisa Pulitzer, and she said that my publisher reached out to me. They saw you on the other show, which was an ABC show, and they want to meet with you. And I said, oh, well, I'm going to New York to be on this show, the one with Dan Harris, which I think was 2020. And then, so she set it up so that I could meet with her publisher at that time. And so when I was there, I met a really wonderful lady from HarperCollins, and she took me and my ex-husband and my daughter at the time. I was still nursing her, so she was just a little tiny baby in my arms the whole time at her house, and she was just a wonderfully kind lady, and she was so sweet to my daughter and to me in Dallas, and she just basically said that they wanted to publish my book. And so from that point on, they sent me an offer, and there was like some back and forth, and basically they wanted to have the book published within 6 months, because they were very much aware of how litigious Scientology is and was, and basically they just wanted to get it done before they had time to try and stop it. And one other thing that I think that I should mention here is that one of the reasons that that they wanted to pick up my book was not just because she'd seen me on this show, but it was also because Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes were getting divorced at the time, and Scientology was very much in the news as a result of this. And the reason I want to make this point clear is that, just for like a little bit of backstory, I spent many years doing many media interviews and spending hours telling my story, and so had many other ex-Scientologists. And basically all that would get taken out of that interview was a tiny quote about Tom Cruise, which was really just me answering a question that they had asked. And so it was very hard to feel like, you know, you poured your heart and soul into telling your whole story and your whole truth, and then they just take like one little section about Tom Cruise just because they believed, I guess, that that's all that readers cared about or wanted to hear. I believe that they mistakenly believe this. And so it was just very frustrating. And but I mean, that's how it is. That's how it is in the world. And so I think that the interesting part is that later on, when Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes got divorced, that actually helped me to get my book deal and to have my story be told. And so I think sometimes people say things like, oh, why are people jumping onto the Linkin Park thing? If you don't already know, the new singer of Linkin Park is a Scientologist who actively supported actor and serial rapist and Scientologist in good standing Danny Masterson at his trials, and came out into the courtroom to intimidate the Jane Does who were telling their stories about when they were raped by Danny Masterson. And so some people criticize, oh, why are ex-Scientologists jumping on the story because it's in the news with celebrities. And the truth is that oftentimes that is the best way to get your story out. It is to hook onto a story of a celebrity so that mainstream media or whoever else will finally listen, and to tell your story and to tell the story of Scientology through that. Super ironically, this is how Scientology spreads the word about Scientology, is through celebrities in the same way. So I almost see it as a great tool to use Scientology's own tactic against them, which is if they're going to use celebrities to act like Scientology is great and fine and not the abusive human trafficking cult that it is, then we can use the celebrities' notoriety and fame to get this important stories of child abuse and all of the many other horrible things that Scientology does. And so not only a smart way of doing it, but it's a very important way of doing it, and has been one of the only ways of getting people's stories out there. And on top of that, if celebrities are going to be okay with, you know, seeing little children carrying their auditing folders in Scientology churches, and if they're okay with being delivered Scientology off the backs of people who are basically indentured slaves and are being paid $50 a week and aren't being allowed to speak to their families or children, then if they're not okay with people using their name to spread the word about Scientology, well, then that's just too bad for them. All right, well, that was a little side rant. Okay, so once my contract was all done, we now had 6 months to write this book. And so between me and Lisa Pulitzer and the editor at HarperCollins, we basically had to do this together. And I learned so many things from this, and it was wonderful, and it was hard, and it was wonderful. But this whole time I was watching my 2 little kids, and they were both, like, my son was 3 and my daughter was just, like, she wasn't even 1 yet, and so it was very hard. But so one thing I wanted to say just at this point in the story is that at the time I always thought, gosh, do I really have a story? Do I really have something interesting to say? Because of course, when things have happened to you in your life, they're totally normal to you. So that's all you have ever known. And so other people might look at my story and be like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So we all normalize our own experiences, and because that's all we have ever known. And I'm not just talking about people in Scientology. Everybody on, like, I have yet to meet somebody who does not have an interesting story that is worth being told. And I think sometimes the only time you realize, okay, this story really is good and interesting, is when you're done writing it and it's all together. And I just think there's so many reasons to tell your story. Of course, if there's, of course, if you're an ex-Scientologist, you know, or an ex-cult member, there's so many reasons to have your story be out there, and you know, to raise awareness about those cults and high control organizations. But I think it's also really important to bring humanity to the people who are in those cults, because oftentimes people think, oh, I would never get involved in that, who would believe that, etc. And that's a little bit of a dangerous way of thinking. And so people are actually better off seeing the humanity of the people involved, because that will help them to relate to that person, so they can, you know, hopefully never get involved in something like that themselves. Or if they begin to get involved in something like that, they can, you know, they can just see some of the signs, because you've taken the time to tell your story. But I think outside of those reasons, I just think that many people want to pass along their story to their kids, to their grandkids, even if it doesn't get published. I think that even seeing your own story and organizing your thoughts about your life and understanding yourself more, understanding why you did certain things that you did, understanding a little bit more about who you are, I just think it's so valuable. I even think in many ways it's like therapy, kind of. And I think it goes both ways. Like, it's also can be a little bit traumatizing. But then when you come through it, you come through it with a greater understanding. And you just gain a lot even just by going through it. So that's my opinion on why I think that it is a great idea for anyone to write a book, and how I think that it can be beneficial and therapeutic. I think that the reason why anybody writes is to better understand the human condition, and I kind of think that that's interesting and exciting to anyone. Alright, so because Scientology is such a confusing, wordy, has its own language, nobody can, like, there's basically no way that I could tell my story to Lisa and that she could write it down. Like, that just wasn't gonna work. Like, you can't expect anybody to instantly understand Scientology and be able to write in that language or understand all of its rules and whatever else, like, within a few months. Like, it's just impossible. It's layers upon layers, and it's just confusing. So what we wound up doing is that I wrote the first draft of my book, and so basically I'm the one who wrote my story down chronologically from beginning to end, and in a way that only I can, because only I know what happened in my life, and also I was the only one in the equation who really understood Scientology. And so now so this is sort of called the rough first draft. And if you're thinking of writing a book of your own, I think that it was so invaluable for me to know this, because I had spent many years trying to write my book before. It's very important for you to know, or is very helpful to me, that your first draft is a piece of shit, and it should be, and that's fine. When you try to write your first draft and you try to edit it and make it sound good at the same time, you're using two different parts of your brain, and it is too much, and it's inefficient. It's much better for you to get it all out, get it all down, which is using one part of your mind, and then go back and do passes at it and edit it. Editing while you're trying to get your story out is taking you out of the moment. It's taking you out of the memories that you're having. And sometimes it's hard to get into that. And so popping in and out of that can actually be really hard and counterproductive. And so I found that just your first draft is going to be a piece of shit, but you need to do that. You need to get through that first draft in order to get to where you need to be. So nothing is wasted, even if it sucks, even if it's unreadable, which it will be. It's still part of the process, and it's just like the chronology of what happened to you. It's just your memories. And so yeah, I can't tell you how important this was for me. There's actually a book that I read later that's called it's the Gotham Writers Workshop, and it's about writing fiction, but still so much of it applies. But it talks about this concept of the rough first draft, and how just even the best writers in the world, they're like world-renowned writers, that their first drafts are just like total garbage, but it's something that you have to get through in order to get to the good stuff. And so then from there, once we got that done, so actually because of the timeline and the rush we were in, at first I was writing the first draft, and then Lisa, and then I was editing a little bit, and then Lisa was going through and further editing it, fixing grammar, punctuation, asking questions that I wouldn't have thought to ask because I grew up in Scientology, so she had an exterior point of view that I never would have had. She would also ask me for things like what were my feelings at the time, which was very interesting because I was just used to shoving down my feelings. And so, you know, we would add that sort of thing in, and we would even add in the part about shoving down your feelings into a hole, because that just further explained it, because I tended to have a very robotic way of writing, as if I was like a machine, because I was very much just intent on giving facts and letting other people make their decision, which I think was a good instinct, but also you can take it too far where it sort of feels like the whole book is being written by a robot. And so, you know, we had to come, like, we had to meet somewhere in the middle. And so Lisa's input and her, like, her wonderful attitude, she's a very caring person, very loving, and also a wonderful writer, was just so helpful to me. But at some point, like, she had to go behind and edit while I was still writing the first draft, because it was just like such a time crunch to get everything done. And it's like, it's a lot of work writing a book, and we had to do many passes. All right, I gotta look both ways so I don't get run over. All right, we're good. So we wound up doing like 4 or 5 passes through this, and then behind Lisa, the HarperCollins editor would come and would do his own take on it, his own edit on it, and all of this was done with track changes, where I would see everything they would fix or correct or add in, and I would approve it or disapprove it, and if I disapproved it, then we would work on a better explanation or something that just accurately represented what happened. And so so what the editor at HarperCollins would do, which I found immensely interesting and helpful, was that he would make sure that each chapter had a beginning, a middle, and an end, had an arc, and had a point to it. And it's hard when you're writing about Scientology and about your whole life not to add a bunch of extraneous details, because we all have them. I mean, that's the difference between writing fiction and writing nonfiction. In fiction, you can just write the things that add to the plot, and it all makes sense. But in life, things aren't quite so to the point, and so it's easy to go on tangents and to get confusing. And so I really had to weigh how much time I gave to different little stories or anecdotes, and the goal was essentially to make the story be readable and understandable without going off on things that while they may have seemed important, they actually detracted from the story, because they were just confusing and just weren't necessary to tell. And that's a huge deal, and that's something that I see sometimes with books of or stories of ex-Scientologists that I think would be hugely helpful, is that when you're writing your first draft, you have to get all that stuff out. You have to tell your full story. But it is okay going back to go, okay, I can let go of some of this in order to tell the entire story, so that it's not confusing, it's not tangential, and it's actually readable. Because in the end, the goal is for other people to read your story and for you to feel understood and seen. And so just making sure that everything in the book has to be there, and they add to the overall arc of the story, and there's a point to each chapter, was something that I took away from that as so valuable. Also, because I was very much avoiding shoving my opinion down people's throats, because I believe that that my duty or my intention is to share my story and tell people the specifics of what happened. I do not believe in telling people what they should think about my story, because it comes that comes across to me as like a little bit manipulative. And I feel like on some level that people get the idea that like people should be able to make up their own mind, and when they do make up their own mind, it sticks more because they figured that out for themselves. Where I just feel like if I don't give the details, but I'm like, it was bad, it was trafficking, it was child abuse, without saying what happened, it's almost like I'm telling people what to think instead of showing them. And so that aspect of it was very important to me. And it also talks about it in this book, The Gotham Writers Workshop, about how important it is to show and not tell. But I took that a little bit too far, and my editor made the very good point, which is that this is your book. People are reading it to find out your opinion. And so at some point, not constantly, endlessly, overbearingly, but it would be great if you would tell what you think about this, tell your opinion about it, instead of being so only factual, like your opinion matters. And it was so true. And I realized that some of me only wanting to give the facts or what happened or details was because in Scientology, I was sort of taught that my opinion didn't matter and that it was just human emotion and reaction, which they would sort of vilify. And so it was good to meet somewhere in the middle. And I think that that was really, really valuable, solid advice. Oh my God, you guys, I have my seat heater on and it's killing me. I'm too hot. It's summer and I'm wearing a turtleneck, but it was so cold today. I don't know what the exact temperature is because I need an oil change, so it's blocking off my thermometer in my car, but I swear it's really cold outside here in San Diego by the ocean. All right, so this process took a few months, and many times when I was writing my story, I became really upset. It was upsetting and hard, and especially since I was looking at things through the point of view of now being a mom. Like, I had 2 little kids that were with me all the time, and it was just a way that I hadn't really looked at my story before. And of course, at the time I was going through other things in life that, like with my family and with my ex-husband's family, that were just making it very hard that were making it a little bit hard to enjoy the process, I guess. And I do think that on many days it affected my mood hugely. I just went through a lot while writing it, but I did come through all the writing with a much greater empathy for myself and a little bit better understanding on what had gone on in my life. And yeah. And while that was really, really helpful, I actually will say that the best part, the part about writing the book that was most helpful, that couldn't exist without me having written the book, was what came after when I published the book, which was so many people reaching out, meeting so many kind people who were insanely supportive and understanding. Because up until this point, when I had been writing the book, I was just in touch with, you know, my in-laws, my family members, all of whom had had similar things happen to them in their past. And so by nature of it, they sort of belittle the story. And, you know, even my ex-husband's father was telling me, Jenna, when you write your book, make sure you don't write anything bad about Scientology technology. You know, there might be things wrong with the organization itself, but Scientology itself is good. And it was like, ugh, you know, or just like everybody, like I remember my grandfather at the time, he'd just come out of Scientology. He basically said the same thing. And so there was all this like pressure from the people around me to sort of insert their version of events into my story. And it honestly wasn't really helpful. And And so it was hard. But once my book got published, just the outpouring of support of people who were just like understanding and empathetic and like, wow, I can't believe you've been through all that. And we're just kind. And we're just like, I'm so sorry, and human, and I wish the best for you and your family, and you should be proud of how strong you are. It was like the sort of validation that you never got in Scientology. Like anytime you complained, Scientology tells you it's because you did something bad. Anytime you are hurt or emotional, they basically tell you to suck it up. And even your friends in Scientology, it's like giving someone sympathy or empathy is just considered like contributing to their bad emotional state. It's like considered almost like, what's the word? I don't know. It's almost considered like condescending in some way. I know there's a word that I'm forgetting, but, and so it was just like getting that kindness from people who, I met on my book tour, from people's comments, even on Amazon, and the emails that I would get and things like that. Like that was the most healing aspect of writing my book for me. And so once the manuscript was done, it had to go through a bunch of lawyers, and a bunch of people had to be contacted to verify accounts of stories that I told in my book. And you know, there was many pass-throughs just for spelling and typing and anything else. And yeah, and then finally it was done and the book got printed. And I just remember when I got my first copy in the mail, and it was like, holy crap, I have a book. This is my baby, and this is what I have been working towards all these months. And it was just so weird to hold the story of my life in my hands. And the relief of being able to hand that to somebody and just be like, this is my story, was huge. Because the amount of times that my story had been misinterpreted, changed, turned into just Tom Cruise, the relief of it just having been out there. Because also you get this sort of anxiety of having to over-explain yourself, especially when you haven't been believed most of your life. You start to like over-explain yourself, and like you just get this franticness, like, and then I feel like people think you look crazy, and then so you act more crazy. And so just having a book that I could hand to people, it just like calmed something down inside of me. That was like, it's all in there. You can let go of some of it. And it was just like a huge relief. And now looking back, the vast majority of what was in there was just all about me being in Scientology. It didn't go into, you know, what had happened after. And now I have 10 more years to add to that. So I know that me writing that down will have its own calming effect and will be its own adventure. And I am excited to start doing that. And so I just kind of need to start off where I did on the last one. And I think if you're thinking of writing a book yourself, it's a great idea to just be like, I'm going to write 1,000 words today. And even if the words are garbage, even if they're not good, even if all they do is jog a memory, you still did your job for that day. You still did good work and did what you set out to do. And all you have to do is do another 1,000 the next day. I personally have no problem writing 1,000 words. I have a problem writing less. I have a problem not writing more than 1,000 words, because I think I like writing more than I like talking. Believe it or not. Anyways, all right. So then when everything was ready, it was a few days after my son's birthday and my birthday. I believe I was 29, but I'm not sure. But then we went to New York for the book tour, and we basically stayed in this hotel there, and we were just taken around from show to show. So my ex-husband, he watched my kids during this time because they were really little, but they would still, like, again, I was still nursing my daughter, so it was just like 3 days of like craziness. I was on The View. I got to meet like Whoopi Goldberg and Sherry Shepherd, and Sherry Shepherd told me a story of a friend that she had in Scientology behind the scenes. It was very interesting. And then also before me on the show, Jewel was on that day, and she like spoke to me briefly, and she was like, "Oh, your family is so beautiful. I'm so glad you're not involved with Scientology anymore, and I just wish you the happiest life." And I was like, because I was like so excited that I was meeting Jewel, because she's so amazing and wonderful. And if you guys haven't read her book, gosh, I don't know what it's called, but she is a freaking amazing person in addition to being an amazing musician. But she has a crazy story that is so freaking uplifting. Like, she has her own cult situation. She's overcome so much. She's amazing. I really think you guys would enjoy reading her book. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. But you know, I went on Piers Morgan, and I went on Anderson Cooper, and I went on Opie and Anthony, and so many other shows. I mean, I was in a room where I like was just in there for a few hours, and they like hooked me up with different radio shows. Like while one radio show would go off, another one would come on. I wasn't really sure who I was talking to at any given point, but it was amazing. And it was amazing to be heard, and to be treated with kindness, and to be believed for once in my life. And it was certainly an adventure. And it was also very hard because I had 2 young kids there, and they were my priority. So I made it very clear that I could only have a short book tour. And every one of my publishers, so my book was published in many different languages. It was Swedish, Dutch, Italian, French, German, and Polish. And I might be missing one. But so each of these books that were translated to a different language had different publishers, and all of my publishers were very kind and accommodating towards me being a mom. And like when I went to Poland, where, you know, they brought the whole family there, and they took care of us, and they made it so that like when I would go on a show, there was someone there to watch the kids. And same thing when I went to Amsterdam to promote my book. Like they just made it as quick as possible. And so it was actually wound up being a really amazing experience. I got to travel around the world, meet some amazing people, amazing publishers, go to different countries, and people in the press. It was kind of wonderful to meet many people who were genuinely interested in just the story and not just the celebrities surrounding it. And I felt, and I've always felt, because I'm Jenna Miscavige, because my uncle is the leader of Scientology, I will get heard more than many ex-Scientologists will. And in the past, when I had been on media, and when it would all just be about Tom Cruise, I just felt like I was like letting people down. And so just doing this whole book and tour, it was like, no, people were really genuinely interested in the story of Scientology, what it's like growing up there, its abuses, and they were really empathetic. And I just finally felt for once like I just did everyone justice, you know, as much as I could. Even if I didn't get it all in one interview, there was another interview which took care of it. And between all of those things, it just felt like, okay, I did the best that I could do, and the story's out there. And that was just wonderful. And I know that this seems like it maybe just applies to me as an ex-Scientologist with this crazy story, but I think that anybody with any story, you know, especially if there is like, you know, a story where the protagonist is in an abusive family, relationship, has a difficult childhood, or even has a great one and then experiences something later in life. I think that the humanity of it is what everyone can relate to. And I think everybody sometimes feels alone in their story and feels like they're the only one. And I think just sharing these stories is so beneficial to everyone. It's equivalent to friendship, camaraderie, community. That's why people read stories. And I just like couldn't encourage anybody anymore to write it down just for yourself. And it was a wonderful experience for me, and I hope I can do it again. And I want to start with those 1,000 words every day, and maybe we can all be accountability buddies and try to do that for ourselves. Anyways, I hope that was helpful or interesting to you guys. I had fun talking about it, and thank you to you guys for sticking around. I see so many wonderfully kind comments that uplift me every day. I'm super proud to be part of this community full of kind people who just go out of their way to say nice things and to make my day better, and to do that for other people in the comments. So thank you so much. I'm incredibly grateful. And don't forget to check out Sins of Scientology. And if you haven't already read my book, you can find it on Amazon. It is called Beyond Belief: My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape. And I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you again soon. Bye.